Hi, this is GILA. So today I want to talk about Israel. I actually live in Israel. I have for some years. I've made my home here. But I did live most of my life in England. I love my home country of Britain and I still miss it. Israel. It's small. No bigger than Wales or New Jersey, and yet the amount of ink spilled over it in the world is unbelievably vast compared with its size. Now, while of course Israel isn't perfect and things happen that are not always wonderful, as they do in any other country, there is a lot of misinformation out there that masquerades as fact. For instance, Israel is not an apartheid state. It is in fact a liberal democracy where all its citizens, which include 20% Arabs, have equal access to social services, medical care, educational opportunities, career advancement, and so on. And every Israeli citizen has far better human rights than anywhere else in the Middle East. Israel is the homeland of the Jewish people. Jews were living and flourishing here for 2,000 years before the very first Arabs invaded in the 7th century. Indeed, even as recently as the 19th century, Israel was essentially a desolate, sparsely populated backwater of the then Turkish Ottoman Empire. Most Arabs from Israel are actually descendants of recent immigrants into the Jewish homeland, with no prior connection to it, who only started coming to Israel when Jews had started returning to try to rebuild the land with their sweat and their hard work. And then there is the name Palestine. Where did it come from? It was actually a name given by the Romans to the then province of Judea. Actually, they called it Palestina, but it's close enough. And it referred back to the already extinct people known as the Philistines, who had lived in the western part of Israel and around Gaza. They were not a Semitic people. They were Europeans, and they had no connection whatsoever with modern Arabs, who only called themselves Palestinian in the last 60 years or so. Before that, the only people who called themselves Palestinian were actually Jews, not Arabs. And indeed, I have in my possession a Palestinian songbook dating from 1944. All the songs are in Hebrew, and they're all about Jews returning to rebuild their land. Whereas Jews take their very name, Yehudim in Hebrew, from the tribe of Judah living in Judea, part of the so-called West Bank, but in reality the Jewish heartland. And Arabs, well, originally they came from Arabia, or certainly their ancestors did. The Arabs living in the West Bank today, though frankly it really should be called Judea and Samaria, are actually under their own Arab leadership, the Palestinian Authority where they live, for all practical day-to-day eventualities, not under Israeli law. Now, I'm sure we've all heard about Palestinian Arab refugees, or rather today nearly all of them are their descendants. But are you aware of the Jewish refugees? Jewish refugees were forced to leave the Arab lands where some of their communities had existed for over 2 millennia. And there were, in fact, a larger number of Jewish refugees who lost more in terms of property and money than did Arab refugees after the Israeli War of Independence. But they're not refugees today. Israel took many of them in. Whereas, except for the case of Jordan, and Jordan, by the way, is a whopping 78% of the land of the British Mandate of Palestine, and is already, or perhaps certainly should be, a Palestinian Arab state. Except for Jordan, Arab refugees were deliberately denied the right to assimilate into and to become citizens of the Arab lands where they ended up, in order to be used as political pawns to continue the attempt to destroy Israel. It's Arabs oppressing Arabs here, not Jews doing so. Be in no doubt that the failure of the Palestinian Arab leadership to accept any of the many offers made for land in what is actually a vital part of the Jewish ancestral home is ultimately because the real goal has never been to live side by side in peace with the Jewish people, who actually have a far greater claim both historically and religiously to the land of Israel than do Arabs, but to destroy the tiny land of Israel as the one and only Jewish state in the world completely. Now, in Israel, we've been fighting against terrorist atrocities and attempts to destroy us for far longer than has the West. And ultimately, and tragically for us all, the hatred towards the Jewish people in our own ancestral land does not really come from anything we might do or not do. It doesn't matter how much land we offer for peace, they will always want more. It ultimately stems from the political ideology of Islam. Land once ruled by Muslims should stay Muslim. Watch out, Spain. We took our land back into Jewish control, or at least some of it, after centuries of Islamic rule. Non-Muslims, certainly Jews or Christians, should be humiliated second-class dhimmis with far fewer rights than Muslims under Sharia law. And sadly, that is still the case on the very holiest Jewish site of all, towards which Jews have always prayed, and Muslims pray towards Mecca in Arabia. The very holiest Jewish site of all is the Temple Mount in Jerusalem, where Jews and other non-Muslims outrageously can be arrested and removed if even observed opening their mouths in prayer. It's crazy and deeply offensive. But the fact that Jews are flourishing, worshipping, enjoying life in at least part of their ancestral homeland of Israel is ultimately a kick in the teeth to Islamic ideology, which posits that Muslims are the true chosen people of God, that Islam supersedes Christianity, which superseded Judaism, and that Muslims are supposedly better people than non-Muslims. It's a supremacist ideology. And by the way, that is a complete misunderstanding of any concept of being chosen by God according to Jewish understanding. Religious Jews believe that they simply have more responsibilities than non-Jews towards the Creator. And that's why it's actually extremely difficult to convert to Judaism. But they're not better as human beings in any way, heaven forbid. Jews are human beings too. Of course, any situation is always deeply complex on the ground. But please be in no doubt that there has never been a distinct people or country called Palestine throughout history, unless you count the non-Arab Philistines, who were probably most closely related to the ancient Greeks. And that the only nation state that has ever existed in Israel throughout history is a Jewish one. Thank you so much for listening. In Israel at the moment, we're preparing for Passover, which starts this Friday night. It's the time of our freedom from slavery, the time when we reclaimed the right to stand up as free human beings and to start our journey home to the promised land. And I wish dignity, respect, and freedom for all people around the world. Goodbye.